Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Near Memo, the Near Media Podcast. This is episode 191, amazingly. And we're here today with Curtis Boyd, who's the CEO and founder of the Transparency Company. Also, our inaugural sponsor for this podcast. And we're very excited and grateful to Curtis for that. And, we couldn't have happened to a better company, as it were. But so thank you very much for that, Curtis. And we want to talk today about the state of review fraud. Curtis just released a very large report, very extensive report that I participated in about consumer harm, but it goes into a lot of stuff. We'll be talking about that a little bit. We'll be talking about piggybacking off of our interview last time with Brad Weatherall, who was the GBP support director. How Google thinks about review fraud, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and whether or not there's been any change over time. The argument is Google is getting more sophisticated about detecting review fraud. It's getting more aggressive and better about pulling down fake reviews. But is that really true? What's really going on? And then we'll also be talking about the future of reviews, given some of the technology that's going on, AI and so on and so forth, and some practical advice for local marketers. So welcome, Curtis. Thanks very much for being on here. First of all, let's hear what the Transparency Company is and does for people that may not be familiar with you.
Sure. Thanks for having me, you guys. The Transparency Company is a technology company that identifies fake reviews, independent of rating, right? So a lot of people traditionally think fake reviews are just these illegitimate one-star reviews.
Or 5-star reviews, as the case may be.
Yeah. Most fake reviews, after researching this for years, most fake reviews are 5-star. And so we provide the tools to understand specifically which 1-star reviews are illegitimate, which 5-star reviews are illegitimate across our clients' businesses as well as their competitors' businesses. And then we are able to do some fun things using that data.
I would just add to your 5-star comment that I am seeing a large number of fake 5-star reviews that are from either sock puppets or companies trying to build reputation before they go rogue. In other words, 5-star reviews may be purchased by a business, a lot of lawyers buy them or whatever, locksmiths, but they may also be an artifact of this whole industry that has grown up around reviews.
Yes, we call them straw reviews. We have a metric, a fun one called turkey in the straw. And what we look for are basically bad actors hidden in good actors. Basically,
the wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yes, exactly. So that's one of I think we have over 190 metrics now, but that's absolutely one of the things we look for. Is
that 190 signals to tell you whether a review is authentic or illegitimate?
Yes. So we've broken up our metrics into profile metrics, review content metrics, and business analytics metrics. And then they're either core analytics or ancillary. And then each one has its own weight and, of course, a bias. We have a new data scientist on our team who's helping us refine these weights and biases to provide better scores and determinations. But there's a lot of data points to look at, some of which are more related to review fraud, some of them not. But it's just every person who does fake reviews does them differently. So we have to look at everything to find the trends.
And this is a probabilistic metric. It's a confidence score, essentially. To what degree do you believe that this is likely to be a false review versus an authentic review?
Yes.
Let's talk briefly about the different kinds of review fraud, because I think one of the things that's not well understood, even in the world of local SEO, and this is something that when we worked together initially a few years ago, I didn't understand. We think about fake reviews as sort of semi-monolithic, right? There are people who are writing fake 5-star reviews or fake 1-star reviews, and you don't really think about all the nuances. So what are the different flavors of review fraud that you see?
Holy moly.
Just the top ones, not exhaustive.
Yeah. Well, you have, we divide them by looking at whether the content is fake or the profile is fake, because you can have fake reviews written on fake profiles, fake reviews written on real profiles, real reviews written on fake profiles, and real reviews. Anyway, it gets very complex, right? So, overwhelming majority of them are fake reviews written on fake profiles, purchased reviews where they were created in mass, and they are essentially, these fictitious experiences that never ever occurred, and they are trying to artificially inflate their ratings.
And these are purchased by the business owner or by a representative of the business to improve the visibility and presumably conversion rate of that business, right?
Yes.
That's the highest
Yes.
category.
That is the largest number of fake reviews by a landslide.
As opposed to black hat, an
Yes.
effort to discredit a business.
Yes.
What is the ratio between somebody hiring a fake review company to create fake positive reviews versus
Yeah.
fake black hat negative reviews to discredit a company?
So in the fake negative review territory, you have competitor 1-star reviews, and you have these essentially blackmail 1-star reviews, right? So fake 1-star reviews is often an upsell from fake 5-star reviews. Generally, a business will start by working with a freelancer overseas, buying fake positive reviews, and they'll say, "Hey, how's this going? This campaign's going pretty well, right? Business is picking up. How would you like to post some 1-star reviews onto your competitors' profiles?" And they will say yes, and they charge a little bit more. What's crazy is these prices are everywhere on the internet, so you can see how much people are charging.
Well, let's stop there for a second, because when you and I have worked together a couple of times. We worked together when I was at Uberall in 2020, and we did a report then.
Yeah.
And then we worked together on a report that I want you to talk about in a minute. That was released this year, but the work I think was done substantially last year, 2020, late 2023. The Now I'm blanking on my question with all that preamble. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about.
I have a
Go ahead.
question about this,
Yeah.
just to fill in here.
Yeah,
So
sure.
these companies, are they small little mom and pops?
Yeah, what's the profile?
In
What's the
Bangladesh,
profile?
or are there companies, criminally driven companies that have scaled this process? Is there some sort of coalition between marketers who've scaled the process and laborers in Bangladesh? And then what sort of effort goes into creating fake profiles? Are they all using
And talk about
VPNs,
AI.
Well,
Talk about API
all
also.
that sort of
Yeah.
stuff?
if you
Yeah.
guys go to the transparency company on the product hunt when we first launched, I include video footage of when I went to India and when I went inside of these warehouses where they create fake reviews. So if you guys want to learn more about the
So
data,
there's a sweatshop kind
oh,
of model. Yeah.
there are many sweatshops creating fake profiles all day long.
And
And
these are people sitting at computers.
yes, fake
And
reviews.
how
It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Fake reviews. Just
So do they have big racks of mobile phones that using VPNs and stuff to do this?
Yep, absolutely, absolutely.
So I know what I was going to ask. I was going to say back when we started working together, you could just do a search for buy 5-star reviews on Yelp, buy 5-star reviews on Google,
Yeah,
etc. And there were a ton of places, ton of links where you could just go, and it was very open. Here's the cost, etc. You alluded to this just a second ago, that this was still the case today.
yes.
Um, why do you think Google hasn't addressed that? I mean, it's a whack-a-mole situation, but it seems like why are they ranking? Why are they ranking sites for these keywords that are
Yeah,
clearly unethical?
yeah. I mean, it's my opinion. My opinions don't necessarily express the beliefs of my company, and I represent myself when I say this. But it's my opinion that Google and other large review marketplaces aren't incentivized to do much about this because of Section 230, right? And the way that their advertisers engage with their platforms, businesses. So fake reviews is if let's say that you de-index a domain that sells fake reviews, another one will pop up right immediately after, right? So sure, they could invest in a crew to maybe continually de-index sites, or topics or intention keyword phrases and clusters, but demand is the issue, because there's not a lot of repercussions currently, we have a major demand for fake reviews, and that's not going to go away. So yeah,
Well, but there is risk, Curtis. Though, if the business gets caught, if there's repeat offenses, there is a risk to the business.
oh, we're trying to create that risk, I can promise
But
you.
Google will take action against. There may be laxity in their enforcement, but sort of at the threshold level. But if they see sort of an egregious offender, if they happen to catch somebody, or there's a repeat offenses, there's risk.
Excuse me.
Bless you, Mike.
Unfortunately, the risk is still too small for the reward.
And
And
the ability for a third party to report uh, fake reviews. In other words, it requires a competitor to report them or
yes,
somebody with an interest. And Google makes that process particularly onerous because you have to use the redressal form,
yes,
which goes off into a deep dark hole, we don't know where, and then you get a case number from the redressal form, and then if you know enough about the process, you then escalate that case number to the forum, where somebody like me will then escalate it to the forum, and even then you may only get 20% of these fake reviews taken down, and then you have to go back at it and say blah blah blah. And so the process, even when they are reported, Greg, is tremendously onerous. And so one can assume from this that Google, one, not only doesn't see any risk, but two, sees this as a minor impediment to their nirvana, right? In other
Yeah.
words, they are willing to accept some fairly large number of fake reviews as just the cost of their doing business. They've created this market that all these spammers have moved into. You can't blame the Indian schmuck working in the sweatshop for making a living. You might have some blame on the person who's built the organization, but it's ultimately Google's has created this marketplace by
Well, right.
incentivizing
And the
reviews
and the
so highly.
marketplace has incentives. That's right.
Right.
So let's talk about the role that AI is playing, and then I want to talk about the report that you published. So obviously, AI, generative AI has really been around since November 2022 when ChatGPT launched. What have you seen in terms of the role of AI in review fraud, and how has that grown, and where does it show up?
yeah.
Is it making review fraud more difficult to detect? What's the impact that it's having?
Yeah. No, it's
There's been layoffs at the sweatshops.
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. They're
Uh,
just like everybody else.
That's
so
right. Mark Zuckerberg
Zuckerberg.
laid off the lowest 5%, and all the programmers are going to become AI. Same thing in the sweatshops.
Exactly.
when we first embarked on this study that we did to analyze 73 million reviews, we found right offhand, I think it's 2.3 million reviews that were generated by AI. But what we looked at were the timelines of when those AI reviews first started appearing in mass, and then how those AI reviews were um, growing, what the velocity was, and how many more were occurring to present from when they were first posted. And in the study, we saw an 80% month over month growth rate of AI reviews. Well, when we finished our data set back in early 2024, we continue to monitor for fake reviews at mass, and we're continuing to see that 80% month over month growth rate. Back then, 2.3 out of 7.4 is, what, 4-ish percent, off the top of my head, right? It's over
25%. 2.3 out of 7.4 is
no
25%.
2.3 out of 74. 2.3 out of 70.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah. So
2.3 million out of 74 million.
yes. So that it's more than 2.3%.
Right.
It's larger, but that number has grown 80% month over month. Right now, we're seeing that number almost at 6 to 7%. Of all reviews being AI, written by some sort of Gen AI tool, and it's making it easier to detect, and that's nice. It's really nice.
So the quality, if you will, of fake reviews has gone down with AI. Is that right?
Yes, yeah,
They
absolutely.
they become more generic, and they've. I mean, I think one of the things you identify as like these sort of weird phrases or self-referential phrases in these reviews. They're not being edited. They're not being sort of
No,
QA'd, if you will.
no. We have our new data scientist is a really fantastic prompt engineer and is able to create prompts that make it more difficult to detect. But we're still training hundreds of thousands of Gen AI reviews based off of these newer prompts that we're able to perform to even go after more sophisticated AI users. But most of these fake review farms, they're not sophisticated in their prompts, and it is really easy to detect. And what we have to do is understand more, not just, okay, sure, this content is generated by AI, but now we have to look at the profile. What's going on there? Is it a more legitimate looking profile? Do we believe this is a real human being, or is this another factory created profile that is going to be replicated at scale?
You would assume that the AI review content is going to get more sophisticated over time.
Yeah,
In the same way that this industry is starting to mature, you would assume that the black hat version of that will mature. I mean, on the review platform side, you've got AI review responses now, almost almost ubiquitously. It's like all
I
the
would also
platforms.
assume that the profile would get more sophisticated. In other words,
they are.
if I were a spammer, I would create, using a VPN, a profile for somebody in New York City that has this persona with these range of interests. This is all within the
With
realm of doable at this point. In other
Yes.
Yeah,
words, and
well, think
this is
about
the
think
tone that this person writes in. He writes 80% in New York City,
Yeah.
Gen Z,
and
blah blah blah.
blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. And you create profiles that become
Well,
tuned to the market.
think
Yeah.
about what Meta Facebook was doing. They wanted to create thousands and thousands of AI characters that were going to live on Facebook and other places and would interact and respond and presumably generate content. This
And
is this is
spew Zuckerberg bullshit.
yeah. That goes with that saying. Mark Zuckerberg is a god. Dot, dot, dot.
Nobody else is being innovative
Yeah,
as
right.
we are. We buy everything.
So you can imagine that this is the black hat version of it, and that it's just going to get more and more sophisticated, and to the extent that Google is, let's say, ambivalent, to be generous, about fake reviews. They claim to be diligent and concerned, but let's just call them ambivalent. They're doing more, but they're not doing enough. um,
So I read a
this
Google blog post for a statement on this issue. Thanks to our evolving machine learning algorithms, we blocked or removed 170 million policy violating reviews from 2023, over 45% more than 2022. That's Google's statement on the matter, just so we can
Okay,
represent their
so
point of view.
let's talk about let's I want to go into that, but let's also talk about the report itself and what it found. When we did our initial work together, when I was at Uberall in 2020, 2021, we found that out of four sites, Google, Facebook, TripAdvisor, and Yelp, Google had the highest amount of review fraud. In the aggregate, it was about 11%, 10.7%, if I remember correctly. Certain vertical categories, it was way more than that, above 20%. Google has claimed, as Mike just alluded to, that it is getting more and more aggressive in removing fake reviews and removing more and more of them every year. In this new report that you just published recently, what did you find? What was the finding about? And it was only a limited number of categories. So that's the difference. At the Uberall in the Uberall report, it was 19 or 20 categories, and this was a more discrete group of categories. So tell us about that.
Yeah, well, we did the study in three major categories, which underlying almost had 100 categories. But
Yeah,
um,
100 subcategories.
yeah, but the three major categories were medical, legal, and home service industries. And we had a lot of different subcategories of each. And we, made sure we separated the data very well to understand which of these subcategories are impacting consumers more. But this study was for the financial impact of review fraud, an estimate on how much consumers are being financially affected by allowing fake reviews to exist online. So We wanted to try and create an economic model that displayed um, not only on a per household level how much consumers are paying out of pocket for low quality service providers that are getting a ton of visibility out there, but what each industry is seeing, um, specific to how consumers in our marketplace purchase. And um, but our studies showed that on average 14% of reviews, and that was I should say that was very conservative.
Conservative.
Yeah,
Conservative.
very conservative. We had overwhelming amount of data to show that they were illegitimate. So
So there's a ton of data in the report. We'll post the report in the show notes so you can look at it. It's not gated. You can just look at it online. And you involved Roberto Cavazos, who is an economics professor, or not, well, he's actually a professor of information technology and decision science in Texas, and he did the economic work in the report. And so, what is the finding? What is the sort of big headline finding of the report in terms of the economic impact, the harm?
yeah, that our economic model estimated $300 billion in annual damage to consumers in just these three industries: medical, legal, and home services. And mind you, that these are estimated costs of what consumers are paying to bad actors. It's also a loss to all the businesses who are playing by the rules, who have earned their reputations and are suffering the consequences of poor moderation, poor fake review identification, and have to try and compete in marketplaces that basically allow whatever, right? They allow business fly by night businesses to pop up and at face value have the same reputation as mom and pops who have evolved their customer experience over 40 years. It's unreal.
And there's pressure on ethical businesses to cheat because of the success that some of the unethical folks have had. And Mike, you experienced that when we were talking about the LSA review fraud stuff. You had some anecdotal examples of people that understood the nature of what was going on and felt a certain amount of pressure to participate, but had not gone over to the dark side.
Certainly easy enough, as Curtis points out, but there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, particularly in home services, of the sort of uh, escalation of fake reviews.
Yeah.
But again, it comes back to it's hard to blame these small time players, the moms and pops. For me, the blame lies squarely where Curtis put it just now, which is poorly moderated, hard to take down, easy to create systems that are not up to the job of moderating this. Google likes to think they're doing it in scale, and they tend to accept a fairly large number of false positives, even in the data that they look at. And I would contend that they don't look at all the data very carefully.
So, Curtis, go ahead.
Well, one time someone came up to me and was like, "Curtis, how is your company able to detect fake reviews better than Google?" And I'm like, "But well, hold on a second. I, I can't necessarily make that claim, but what I will say is that we do identify fake reviews that are clearly published live today that exist, right? So how come we're able to do that?" And I tell people that it's the way we approach identifying fake reviews. A lot of marketplaces will take data about a single reviewer and one at a time make decisions. Hey, I'm looking at just this reviewer, just this review, and I'm going to give it a quick pass fail, right? So they have a finite number of data points that they look at in real time as these reviews kind of get flushed through. Here at the Transparency Company, we look at all the reviews at the same time. We're looking at millions and millions of data points simultaneously to make a decision. We're not looking at one review as it's posted. That's while they have access to backend metrics like IP address, MAC address, more engagement metrics, right, that we don't have access to. There's not as many data points to consider when versus our approach of looking at all of them at the same time. Because we look at everything, we're able to visualize the trends of all the reviewers and visualize why these red flags appear throughout, a timeline. So yeah, it's I'm not saying that there's an excuse for poor, like we figured this out. Yelp's figured out a lot of other stuff as well regarding some of the more advanced techniques. But what's going on? Why aren't these other marketplaces evolving and finding?
I would contend that Google does do that to some limited extent, at least over the last 2 years. And you can see it because there are waves of forum reports of
Yes.
missing reviews.
Yeah.
So one assumes that they do what you say, which is they look at the user at the review and decide right then and there what lock it. But then it appears to me that they then go back using some batch system, and we see those as waves that occur in the forum. Not to defend their behavior, though, because it still is largely inadequate to the task
So
and
let's
catches a lot of really good reviews in the process. And when these reviews get lost, the good ones, they have no mechanism for return.
let's talk about that a little bit, because last couple of episodes we had our featured guest was Brad Weatherall, who was the director of support operations for Google Business Profile. And Brad is a great guy, very nice guy, very sincere. He's not somebody who's a cynic and somebody who's kind of just wink, wink, we're doing our job. But he wasn't on the trust and safety team. He wasn't in charge of detecting review fraud. But what he articulated, the sort of two broad themes that he articulated, is that Google is getting much better at enforcing its policies and detecting review fraud. Over time it has gotten better, and he said that they're trying to strike a balance between turning the knobs on the algorithm so that it gets too many false positives, which creates a burden on support in his organization. He's no longer there. Versus kind of relaxing the algorithm and reducing the support inquiries that Mike is talking about, but at the same time letting more bad actors through. And he said that they arrived at a position where about 5 to 10% of false positives, meaning legitimate reviews, were being taken down, was acceptable given the scale that they were operating at. That was sort of my paraphrase of what he was saying. And he also said that he felt that enforcement was getting better over time, but the data in the two reports that sort of bookend this conversation, the 2020-2021 report that we did together, and then this new report with the 73 million reviews, the fake review percentages are not that different. 11% and almost 14%.
Yeah.
And that number is consistent with Brad said is within Google's level of tolerance. AI is an imprecise machine. Fuzzy logic is imprecise. And they are willing to accept a 10% error rate and then not willing to put humans on the job to double check. That's the real issue there, is that they do accept a fairly large percentage of false positives, which is consistent with transparency companies' findings in terms of the percentage, maybe a little low because they don't look everywhere. But the bigger problem is that they're unwilling to moderate those with more intelligent post-analytic capabilities.
Yeah, I think last year they disclosed 170 million reviews.
Yeah,
right?
Mike mentioned that. Yeah.
And if you think about fake review fulfillment centers, you have, I think, three tiers. You have your really amateur, right? You're more sophisticated and very sophisticated. Now, your really amateurs, they're probably the ones getting caught up in that 170 million number, right? They were identified. They're getting removed, and they're not very sophisticated. Then you're getting a bit more sophisticated. They're bypassing the detection. They exist on the platform right now, right? And 500 million reviews a year are being published. They're saying 10% is acceptable for us. That's 50 million reviews here in this tier. And then you have your really advanced users, really advanced fake review actors that not only completely bypass the detection, but really blend into an organic looking set of reviews. It's staggering to me, the number that they find acceptable. That acceptable level of damage is the $300 billion a year.
Well, it's more because this is a relatively. I mean, it's a lot of subcategories, but it's three big verticals, but it's not all encompassing, right? So if there's 300 billion or something approaching, let's call that a directional number because it was based on modeling that was pretty thoughtful. But nonetheless, let's say it's several hundred billion. If you expand that to the entire marketplace, you're looking at 2x, 3x that number probably ultimately.
And I would contend that there's a number that you're missing, Curtis, and that is false positives go in both directions. It misses fake reviews, leaves up X number of them, but it also captures real reviews and takes down X number of them, leaving a deleterious impact on those legitimate businesses that are in this competitive race.
Right,
so
right.
And that's
Degrading their
unaccounted for in
visibility.
this whole, both our conversation and your data, which is that the algorithm makes mistakes in both directions. And Google doesn't think that the 50 million good reviews that were taken down are even countable towards the total, right? No,
I mean, what it means, Mike, is that I'm likely to see more fraudsters and fewer ethical businesses, to put it at the crudest level. So if I'm looking for an HVAC contractor,
Greg, never look for an HVAC contractor on Google. This is my advice to you. It's been that way for years, and you keep doing it. God darn it! Give it up.
This is the hypothetical. This is the hypothetical services equivalent of sushi or pizza from a consumer standpoint. Anyway, so
yeah, but you've told me about the roofer and the various other problems you've had, or plumber, whatever it was last year. It's like, I can't believe you're still using Google to find these guys.
I'm not. That's bad. I just use it for work to see what's going on. If I'm looking for an HVAC contractor to service, my gas heater or whatever. What you're describing, Mike, is I'm more likely to see a fraudster, and the ethical businesses that are trying to do a good job are not as visible because their good reviews are being taken down, and that affects their ranking.
Well, particularly newer businesses and home services are more impacted by this new algorithm that Google has. So if you're just starting out, it's even harder to get legitimate. Thank you for joining us for part 1 of our interview with Curtis Boyd of the Transparency Company. Please join us next week for part 2 of our conversation on review fraud, where we will discuss the changing marketplace dynamics, the impact of the new FTC rules, and how businesses and agencies need to adapt to these many changes.